2.5 months ago, when Turkey's constitutional court freed 2 journalists accused of treason, saying their rights, including freedom of expression, had been violated, Turks knew there was a showdown coming. President Tayyip Erdogan had vowed that the journalists would pay for the story they published and said he would not respect the court's ruling. In the latest verdict, delivered May 6th, a lower court sentenced Can Dündar, the editor of Cumhuriyet, and Erdem Gül, the paper's Ankara bureau chief, to 5 years in prison for leaking state secrets over a story alleging that the Turkish security services had been smuggling arms to rebel fighters in Syria. The fact that a lower court disagrees with a higher constitutional court on a constitutional question relating to freedom of the press, and did so after the president had intervened publicly, has critics questioning the rule of law in Turkey. The AK Party government in Ankara is not mincing words these days about the news media, and it's going after outlets outside Turkey, notably in Germany, an indication that Ankara feels it has some leverage over the European Union, since Turkey can control the flow of refugees trying to get into Europe. In short, when it comes to freedom of the press in Turkey, President Erdogan and the government there may as well be saying to the EU and their critics overseas, what are you going to do about it? Our starting point this week is Istanbul. The case against the Cumhuriyet journalists took a bizarre turn just before the verdict came down. A gunman fired shots at the paper's editor, missing Can Dündar, slightly wounding a nearby reporter. Shortly thereafter, Dündar and his colleague Erdem Gül were convicted and sentenced to 5 years in jail.
2 saat içinde 2 suikast yaşadık. Birisi silahlıydı, diğeri yasaldı.
Turkey claims to have a sound democracy, constitutionally assured. If that were true, the case would probably have never made it to court, based on the interference of the president alone.
Baştan beri biliyorsunuz,
Erdogan got involved in this case right from the beginning. He said that Dündar and Gül would pay a price for their reporting.
Bu haberi özel haber olarak yapan kişi de öyle zannediyorum ki bunun bedelini ağır ödeyecek.
And this is important because it shows there was political interference with the judiciary. It tells us that in Turkey, the constitutional separation of powers that preserves the independence of the judiciary is no longer working.
pek çalışmadığını görüyoruz.
Terör propagandasını yapıyor.
And then the media, I would call regimes media, targeted almost on daily basis, Can Dündar and Erdem Gül. They have created a very hostile atmosphere in the country. They have demonized Can Dündar and Erdem Gül for doing their job, which is journalism. So they have criminalized journalism and anything which is detrimental.
The legal case is complicated. The original decision to free the defendants in February was made by a higher court, Turkey's constitutional court. That's the judgment President Erdogan refused to recognize.
Verdiği kararı da uymuyorum, saygı da duymuyorum.
Then the second ruling from a lower court ended in the convictions. Erdogan's defenders, and there are plenty in the Turkish media, tend to sidestep the president's involvement in the case, which is difficult to defend. Their arguments are largely procedural.
Yes, the president's words drew criticism from many people, but the Constitutional Court's decision on their arrest was seen as beyond its judicial powers. And it's not only Erdogan who said this. There's a widespread notion that the constitutional courts are behaving more as activists, which is beyond their powers.
The Cumhuriyet trial is just one front in the AK Party's war against journalists. 3 months ago, the government took over Zaman, Turkey's biggest newspaper, which was affiliated with the Gulen Group, a religious and social movement that supported Erdogan until 2013. These days, Erdogan calls his former Gulenist allies terrorists, and the government has gone after their news outlets. There's a pattern here. When another media conglomerate, Doğan Yan, fell out with Erdogan in 2009, it suddenly got fined for back taxes, $2.5 billion. It's now a shell of its former self. The latest twist relates to what is said about Turkey and its president in other countries. More and more foreign reporters are being denied re-entry visas, effectively locked out of Turkey. When a comedian lampooned Erdogan on German television, Turkey demanded Germany prosecute him. Prosecutors are now looking into the case, which German free speech advocates deplored. Germany and the European Union have recently cozied up to Turkey, tempering their criticism on media freedom there, following the deal reached 2 months ago, when Turkey agreed to stem the flow of Syrian refugees through its borders and into Europe.
Clearly, there's been an attempt by the European Union to appease Mr. Erdogan. They have decided to put their own interests first, and their own interests are in getting Turkey to stop the flow of refugees. They are prepared to make concessions to appease Mr. Erdogan to stop this from happening. But even that appears to be breaking down. Turkey is pushing the envelope so far that at a certain point, Europe is exasperated. So that very deal is in danger of breaking down now.
This Syria policy has taken the EU hostage through the refugee crisis. Erdogan took the initiative to use the refugee crisis in blackmailing the EU and to link with the domestic agenda. But Europe had to stay silent for a long time when the regime was killing journalism in Turkey.
The EU is seen as hypocritical. Sure, there are problems in Turkey, but no more than in any European country. In Europe, journalists are tried in cases that are similar to Dündar's for revealing state secrets. Just recently in Germany, 5 journalists were tried in a similar case.
That is not accurate. German prosecutors say they are investigating 5 journalists over a story about weapons shipments to Mexico. But no charges have been laid. No one is on trial. There really is no comparison. However, the primary media story in Turkey is about the journalism there. The gunman outside the court that day has reportedly said he wasn't shooting to kill. He was aiming at Can Dündar's leg. Apparently, he just wanted to scare him. In that respect, the gunman may be a mere byproduct of President Erdogan and the government, who have scared so many journalists and activists into silence.
The atmosphere is significant because within it, not only are journalists punished, but others are also encouraged to punish them. There will be those who calculate that if they, in one sense or another, punish those who are speaking out against the government, then they may be rewarded. So those in positions of power are motivated to display loyalty to Erdogan. This is the kind of atmosphere that's been created.
And it was certainly Can Dündar's opinion that this gun had been fired, that he had been targeted not just by the judicial processes, but that there had been encouragement from what he called the highest quarters to encourage this assassination attempt against him.
Kimdir nedir bilmiyorum ama kimlerin hedef gösterdiğini iyi biliyoruz.
And we as journalists working in Turkey are aware that the atmosphere has become very dark.
On the download now, our viewers with some thoughts on the state of journalism in Tayyip Erdogan's Turkey.
The state, now represented almost solely by President Erdogan, has a responsibility to protect. And so far, it hasn't been the case. Instead, there has been a lot of criticism and direct pointing out the fingers towards journalists. So you figure yourself out who's responsible for this climate.
President Erdogan does not take legal action against journalists unless there is a heinous attack against his personality and family. The comments of the German satirist Jan Böhmermann attacked not only Erdogan but all Muslims in general. Europe should not be kind to vicious people, including journalists, who paved the way for new racist and Islamophobic remarks that don't have anything to do with reporting or free speech.